It is August 31st, and it is 8:03 p.m. This is Writing Walks, and I'm your guide, Alex Italander. And we're doing a very special episode today because we have a very special guest on, Sarah Rhea Werner of Girl in Space and the Right Now podcast. How are you doing, Sarah?
Hello. I think I'm doing all right. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. I was going to say, this is actually you're kind of special in that I've only ever had one other guest on before, which was my son when I was talking about writing. And so, yes, it's an honor to have you on as our second guest.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
And I just wanted to point out, I'm not intentionally copying what you've done with Right Now podcast and having a ton of guests on. But then I was also thinking, isn't imitation the greatest form of flattery, right?
Well, it's funny you say that. I'd gotten away from having guests, and I only did them recently because I'm going through this huge imposter syndrome, and I feel like I don't have enough inside of me to talk about. And so that's why I've been having guests. And so, I hope you're not in the same place I am.
No, I just love talking to you. And so
good. Okay, good.
Have you on. It's great. I was also going to say, so this episode is also as close, I think, as to live as Writing Walks will ever get, because once we're done here, I'm going to edit the episode because it's the last day of the month. It needs to go up tonight at midnight. No pressure.
No pressure. Oh, this is exciting. Oh, I'm so nervous.
So the whole reason I wanted to actually do this episode with you is from a book recommendation you gave me, which is The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry, which came out in 2020. I'd asked for some horror recommendations from you, and this is one of the ones you suggested, and I read it about a month ago or so, and really kind of got hooked into it, really enjoyed it, but also had some interesting thoughts about it that I wanted to talk with you. When was the last, do you remember reading it? How familiar is it to you?
Oh gosh. I think I read it probably about 3 or 4 months ago. And so I have it open over here. I've been doing all of my reading lately on my phone, which I know some people will be like, oh no, but it's so handy and it lights up at night. And I can like carry 1,000 books around with me wherever I go. So I have it here open in front of me. So hopefully I'll be able to remember all the things.
Well, I'm going to start off with just reading a little summary I was able to find. I wanted to find like a detailed summary because in this episode, we're going to be talking in detail about everything. So if anyone doesn't want spoilers, but they want to read this book beforehand, stop now and go read it and then come back.
Yes.
But I'll just start up with the summary I was able to find on, I think it was Goodreads. It's just a general summary. So again, that's The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. When the bodies of 2 girls are found torn apart in the town of Smith Hollow, Lauren is surprised, but she also expects that the police won't find the killer. After all, the year before her father's body was found with his heart missing, and since then, everyone has moved on. Even her best friend, Miranda, has become more interested in boys than in spending time at the old ghost tree, the way they used to when they were kids. So when Lauren has a vision of a monster dragging the remains of the girls through the woods, she knows she can't just do nothing, not like the rest of her town. But as she draws closer to answers, she realizes that the foundation of her seemingly normal town might be rotten at the center, and that if nobody else stands for the missing, she will. So what were your overall thoughts about the book?
Overall thoughts about the book. Okay, first, I just checked my Goodreads. I'm very, very up to date on Goodreads. And apparently I read this in February of 2020. So it's been longer than I thought, but I do still remember it. I remember this being really
Did you get an advanced reader copy or something?
I didn't.
Oh, because I thought it came out fall, but maybe that was just a paperback or something.
Well, I bought the ebook, so I don't know when they released that. I don't know.
And again, last year was so out of whack.
How
maybe.
I get my books. Yeah. Maybe I got it like illegally or like I time traveled or something.
Which adds even more to the story.
It does. You probably shouldn't listen to or read the mysterious horror book that shows up uninvited on your phone.
But it was really good, though.
It was really good. It was atmospheric. It had female leads, which I always appreciate. It had intergenerational communication, which I always appreciate. There's a grandmother, there's daughters. Yep. And I really liked that it let us get close to the characters. There was still a little bit of there was a sense of danger, which I also appreciated. You didn't know who was going to die and who was going to live.
Who was going to survive. Yeah, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of kind of point of view switching, which I actually saw on Guru Read some people complaining about that, but I liked because you got to see a lot more different characters. There's a nice diverse cast too of different backgrounds and ethnicities and stuff. And then you don't know who's going to survive and who will, who's going to make it through.
Oh yeah. And these days when I'm reading, I'm looking for a diverse cast. I'm looking for well-written voices. So I don't know. So I felt like this, in addition to being just generally, pretty well written and a really engaging story and likable characters, it just sucked me in and I enjoyed it. How about you? What were your impressions and thoughts?
I think it really kind of reminded me of the type of story I really enjoy reading and tend to write about sometimes too, of, a strange old town where something's not right, something's messed up. It reminded me a lot of Stephen King's It. I'm trying to remember Dan Simmons. I can't remember which one it is now. He has one like that too, of just like where things are messed up and in a town. And especially where in this particular one too, it's the kids are the only ones that actually know what's going on. And here it's just a few characters that actually know what's going on, whereas the rest of the town is totally like oblivious. And because there's a bigger reason behind that and story of what, the history of the town and all that too. Yeah. I was wondering too, because I was checking to see what genre it was rated at, because it felt like obviously classic horror, but I was always wondering if it's like would be considered YA, young adult or not, because it was teenage characters for the main part as your main characters, but it was also really, just as dark as, it was or anything like that too. Yeah. So it's just classic horror to me.
Yeah, me too. Well, and there's, I don't know if this is a new genre really, but new adult. I've seen a lot of books cropping up in new adult, which kind of, I don't really know if this is that genre or anything like that, because that tends to focus on people in their early 20s. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was a little too adult to be YA, but it also, I don't know. I enjoyed it as an adult. I enjoyed it. I didn't feel talked down to or patronized or anything like that. So, yeah.
Were you ever have any like weaknesses you felt with the book?
I have a problem where I always want to see something. Oh, my cat Midori is here. Hello.
Midori will always make an entrance if Sarah Warner.
If Sarah's talking, Midori will be here. I always want something from horror that will blow my mind. Like the reason I read horror is one of the same reasons I read sci-fi, which is to like see something new and to feel something new. And I've gotten into cosmic horror recently, and that does a really good job of like just completely blowing your mind and showing
like
you
horror in space, or
it's more like the Cthulhu sort of realms upon realms, interdimensional kind of stuff. So if you read Victor LaValle's The Ballad of Black Tom, that's
Changeling.
Oh, yes.
Actually, now you were talking about it. Yeah, Changeling actually definitely had some similarities with this too. Yeah. With a kind of like a mythological fairy angle to it, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm always reminded of a quote from a book by George Eliot where the main character is thinking, and it's the book is The Mill on the Floss, and the character is reminiscing about, I love singing, but the voices are never rich and deep enough for me. And I love reading, but the stories are never rich and deep enough for me. And when a story does hit that aspect where it is just completely mind blowing, I lose my mind over it. And this one got close. Close.
It was pretty.
I was along for the ride. I was engaged. I didn't see, at least, my memory of reading it whenever I read it. I didn't like have any red flags necessarily with it. And it was enjoyable, but it wasn't like new.
Yeah. I could, again, because of kind of some of the other stories we mentioned, things like that. I felt a little icked out, I think, with her kind of love interest, but just her boyfriend being 18 and she was 15. And I don't know if that was just like something I was missing, or like it's just like, okay, yeah, you're teenagers, but that's a huge gap.
Was that Jack?
Maybe.
But yeah, I remember she saw this like hunky guy walking out of that shed, and that was like the first time.
This was the guy who knew her when she was younger too.
Yes.
And taught her, what did he taught her to do something and stuff like that when they were like, when she was like 11 and he was, I guess, 13, 14 or whatever. Yeah. So
that's a little
little bit of an icky. Yeah.
Well, and especially when one is 18 and one is not 18.
Just because it is a big, I mean, and I guess the balance was with her good friend Miranda. That's the only guy she's interested in. She wants the older guys. She wants to, be older than she is and do all the things that older people are doing. And
like having been a 15-year-old girl at one point myself, like when you're 15, you don't think that 18 is really that much different. Like because you think that you're old, you think that you've seen it all, when you're a 15-year-old girl, you're like, oh, it's not really like 3 years, not that big a deal. And like now is like almost 40. I'm like, oh, but it is a big deal, finger waving and stuff.
And I can definitely remember being envious when I was 15 of, the older boys and kids and like, well, they get to do other stuff and cooler stuff. And usually have girlfriends or boyfriends and all this stuff too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if there's like an aspirational thing with this 15-year-old that she gets to. So
yeah, I mean, and it kind of worked again within the story, but it was a little icky for me just because he was that much older, even though he ended up being a nice guy and everything
Yes.
And then it was interesting too that it was set in, I think it was 1985.
Yes.
The 80s.
Yes. It just pulled to mind Stranger Things and It, and there's definitely a vibe with things set in the 80s. But tell me more about your thoughts on that side.
Well, and it's fun because she dropped a ton of like music references and all this stuff, which I enjoyed because I was I 6 at the time, but still remember a lot of the 80s music and all that stuff too. Though from the pictures of the author I've seen, she seems more like early 30s, maybe late 20s. So I don't know because I would think I'm writing a similar sort of novel where there's a weird town or weird stuff going on involving teenagers, and I'm setting it in the late 90s because that's when I was a teenager, so I know all the stuff really well. And again, I have various references, so I'm wondering if that's kind of what she was doing here. But again, she seems a little older, younger than she would fit into that period, or she just really likes it.
Well, and at that point, is it nostalgia or is it historical fiction? Like what point do you cross that line?
Did it remind you of any other books you've read? Well, I guess you kind of mentioned Victor Laval a little bit, but
the tone of it, I wanted it to be more like The Ballad of Black Tom. I wanted it to be more all encompassing. But it had so many good elements. The teenagers and their relationships, of course, I'm a big fan of Buffy. And so like, I always think of that a little bit. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yes. And sort of going through, teenage life and feeling like the grownups don't understand you and you are not understood. And so there was a strong element of that. And
I guess that would make her grandma Giles then, right?
I love that. I loved her grandma.
Yeah.
I loved her. I always love, this is something I don't see enough of. Sorry, this is a complete tangent and we can talk about this later, but her relationship with her grandma, intergenerational relationships, those are so rich and they're so rare. I feel like they're so rare.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
And it was funny because the grandma just wanted to talk with her and the mom was unhappy about it because she wasn't involved.
I know. And this is just such a, very Gilmore
Girls. Another
Girls.
author it's kind of reminding me of too. Did you ever read Christopher Pike?
Yes, I did. Oh gosh. Yeah. I forgot about Christopher Pike.
But again, because I would consider this much more of an adult novel over there's more, sex and stuff happening and things like that too. It's definitely pushing it further, because I basically bridged the gap from Christopher Pike. I went to Stephen King, and that's definitely where this is more leading to that side.
Yeah. And, with the whole like, spooky woods, haunted woods kind of thing. I was also reminded of, oh shoot. And it just left my brain. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
But yeah. Sorry. But
and then we can talk a little bit about the big reveal story of it. It's almost like there's a fairy tale event way in the past where what you remember?
I just remembered. Do you remember? Did you ever watch the Sleepy Hollow TV show? If that's what it was called, it reminded me of that just a little bit.
We did when we loved it, and then they started messing with the cast and getting rid of the people of color and whiting it, and we're like, done.
No, thanks. That's also when I left. So, yep.
And it was really good. Yeah.
But it had that vibe to it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a little bit, I guess, of Once Upon a Time.
Oh, yes, which I also...
Yeah. But yeah, so the big kind of story behind it, as I'm kind of remembering it now, is like there's an old kind of love story where these two people fall in love, and then the father doesn't want her to be with his son, and so has her killed. And then but then she's like, I'm trying to remember, is she a witch or she's related to a witch family?
She came from a family of witches, and there were always... Is this the thing where there were always 3 of them or something like that? And they killed one.
I really thought it was going to do the fates there, but I'm glad it didn't, honestly.
I was expecting that too.
Yeah, I was like, oh, here we go. Gonna cut some strings and stuff. No, oh, good.
So that was refreshing that it didn't kind of overstep its bounds into stories that it wasn't really a part of. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like hinting at the fables. Like, and then they put this basically huge curse on the town where there's like this creature that comes, is it like every generation? I'm trying to remember. Details a little vague, but there's something bad that comes around.
I want to say something woke it up, but I might be misremembering.
But it was also tied into the success of the town financially. They have it was a chili factory, I think, that employs a lot of people and just like is very successful and all this stuff. And that to keep the success of the town going and keep it healthy, they have to sacrifice a girl. I think it's once a year. It couldn't have been every month. That seems like too much.
I feel like that's too much. I think people would notice every year, every 3 years or something.
And there was like a lottery that was picked, kind of like Shirley Jackson's lottery.
Shirley Jackson,
of picking one, and then that's the one you're supposed to have. And then the at the crux of the story is the main character is picked when she was 14. I can't remember what it was. Yeah.
Yes.
And her dad was totally against it. The town all knows about it, but then after it happens, they have this like amnesia and forget that it ever really happened, even if they've lost their own child, which is really crazy.
That's the creepy thing. Like that's to pass away and not be remembered is, I don't know. I feel like truly terrifying.
And then, so basically the father doesn't want to sacrifice her, so he goes instead, and that's who the monster kills and rips out his heart. And by doing that, it's like broken. I really liked this idea that it's this ritual, and it broke the ritual, the rules of the ritual. So now the monster's like, hey, I can do whatever I want. So I'm just going to kill. And instead of it being at the ghost tree as it's supposed to be, these 2 dead girls end up in some horrible conservative woman's backyard. And
oh, that lady.
Like really,
what was her name? Do we know? Do we care? Did we retain that?
It's her name is not important. All she was horribly racist and lived across the street from a Latino family and was horrible to them, even though they were awesome people. And
oh, I forgot about her. I just like totally blocked her out of my mind because I hated her so much.
But it's like really the whole town hates her too and is all in on it. Yeah. But then also, as that was part of the story, she also lost her daughter when she was younger too, like 50, 80 years ago. And it's totally blocked that out. And I thought she handled it really well when little bits of these things would come out in the open. And for a second, they would realize it. And then, oh no, it wasn't that way. And then it would go away again. I thought it was handled really well, the back and forth of that.
That's a really good point. That is very difficult to pull off with writing, and Christina Henry pulled it off really well. Like that was very well done.
Have you read any of her other books?
I have Alice that's been downloaded on my phone since it came out. And I just got it because I liked the cover and I have never read it. And I didn't actually realize after I finished reading The Ghost Tree and I was going on to Goodreads to like, say that I'd finished it. I was like, oh, that's the same author. And so I'm going to have to.
But I was thinking, looking at our other books, this feels very different from those ones, though, doesn't it? Like it's a whole new, like really new genre area and things she's stepping into, and she handled it incredibly well.
Yes. Because I feel like a lot of her other stuff is retellings of fairy tales or retellings of like very well-known fantasy.
So she's
stories.
A little bit of that, but then this was her making her own kind of footprint in it in a way.
Yeah,
cool.
Yes,
very cool.
And it did feel original. I felt like I was reading, not something like mind-blowingly new, but it felt fresh.
So the one kind of thing that I really wanted to kind of talk with you about, why this whole thing started, is So you kind of had this set up at the beginning of the book with the murders and stuff and getting a feel for the characters. And then at the start of the second part, she goes over to visit her grandma, and then the grandma just tells her the whole story of what the ritual is and all this stuff, and just like overloads her for whatever it is, 20 pages. And that felt like a little bit of a cop-out to me. I felt like for just how she just like dropped it all there. What was your feeling?
Yes, no, I felt the same. And at the time when I was reading it, I was like, oh, okay. And as a writer, my brain recognizes, oh, it's info dump time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And part of me is okay with that. Part of me, I liked the grandmother's voice.
But there's info dump, but then there's like, this was like successive like garbage trucks of info.
Yeah. It was a lot of information. And I'm trying to think. Well, and I'm trying to think too. I recently have you read The Fisherman by John Langan?
No, but I know of it. Yeah.
Okay. The way that is structured, it's similar to this. It tells you a very complicated, huge history right smack in the middle of the book, but it does it in a way that transports you to that time, and you get to be in the story at that time. But I don't know how you would have done it like in this book.
Well, and that's kind of what my comment was, because I was thinking again of it, where between each part of the book, you had these, what he literally called interludes, where you went back in time to different periods and saw the ritual beginning, or and all these different things going on. And I felt like she could have done a similar thing here to some extent, of either back and forths or something, or have them researching it and finding little bits in that way, a little less just like, here it is all in the start of the second part. Now you got it all. Let's keep moving. And instead of like, but I mean, I want to also, because it felt like, I didn't actually see how many pages it is, but it felt like kind of a short book too, relatively for all the story that was in there. And maybe she didn't want to write, an extra 200 pages of story for all this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering too, if it's a matter of structure or art, and I can't decide like which of the two I would like to see it emerge as. Well, probably both, I guess, ideally.
I mean, it could also be too, I'm just thinking it was the bombshell at the start of the second act of showing, hey, the grandma knows everything, and Lauren's right in smack in the middle of it, and the whole part of the story, even though she doesn't want to be and doesn't really realize it. And so maybe it was a surprise moment kind of early on to kind of give you something. Yeah,
but then since the author so deftly switches between points of view throughout the story, I'd almost just like to see a flashback of the grandmother, or I don't know.
Yeah, it always feels like it could have been like there's a part of the book where she did write that, and we're like, well, this is too long. You can't have this. We need this limit. And then she's like, okay, I'll do it this way instead, or whatever. Which I would have maybe understood if it'd been like, well, this is branded as YA, so you need to be shorter, or something. But it's not. So
right. And
I don't know how long The Fisherman is, but it's over 1,000 pages. So Fisherman's long too. Yeah,
it's big.
It's a big fish, would you say then? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Big fish tail. Is that what it's called? Fish story.
A whopper. So that pretty much covers everything I wanted to kind of talk about with this. Did you have any last thoughts or comments? I mean, again, this was a kind of overall a minor thing. This is more of a writer nitpicky thing, I think, for me. But I think overall, any reader would just enjoy it and keep going all along. And the ending the ending worked too. I think it all kept going pretty well. And not everyone does make it out alive. And
yes, it wraps it up well.
There was also the part where, because the creature has now broken these rules, it's able to also shapeshift. That was the other big thing too. So it's able to be this boy that she's interested in, as well as the other boy. And there was that great little dynamic where you didn't know who he was actually looking like. And I kept thinking it was the boyfriend that she was interested in, and that Miranda was like also interested in or something. And then it turned out to be, it's this other guy that she also was, it was nicely done that way too. It was a good little mystery within.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I'd completely forgotten about that.
It was the cop that she likes too,
I do appreciate that. And I don't know, shape-shifting, I always look at it's like a tool that kind of makes me take a step back.
Almost a MacGuffin, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. It makes me take a step back and say like, okay, why are you using this? And how are you using it? And are you doing this just to like manipulate the way we feel? Is this an easy way out? So I always get a little, a little
it's a
icky.
slippery slope, definitely.
Well, and just because you can do so many like kind of maybe even unintentionally terrible things with like, personhood and identity theft and just, all sorts
but
of
I think it worked
stuff.
in this story for the rules she set for the story. And again, it was kind of fun having it be this mystery of your thinking it might be this person. And for me, it turned out to be a different person that was like, oh yeah, of course it was him. It was like a little mystery within the story. Yeah.
A little mystery always keeps me a little bit extra engaged. And like, I read a lot of like paranormal romance and fantasy, and like, they always have like just a nice little murder mystery in there just for the characters to have something to do while they fall in love. So
yeah. And as I said, it did end well for a horror novel, which can't always be said. And it wasn't too much either. Sometimes it's just like, so like guns blazing, everything coming down and all that stuff. And it is balanced well. And
endings are hard, and endings in horror, I think, are even harder because you're trying to do so many different things with one short piece of the book.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I think that wraps up our little chat for the Ghost Tree. So now we're going to move on to our little other discussion I wanted to talk about, which is some call it discovery writing. Some call it being in the zone when you're writing, or whatever you're saying, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like you really have to just be writing a lot and be, lost deep in a project to actually get into that zone and know what it feels like. What do you call it, Sarah?
I call it flow. I've also called it the zone. I call it in the writing zone. But for me, it's this beautiful space of timelessness. For me, time is always such a limiting factor. And I'm always
Hawaii.
Oh, yes. It's such a gift. Yes. You go in and every moment is simultaneously speeding by, but also its own eternity. And I live for that.
It is
I
like
live
out of
for
time.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
and
magic.
then when you're finished, whatever it is, you're still kind of in it. So you're on like this, it is kind of like a high, like a drug high or whatever.
It is. It is. And it's utterly addictive. And it's just pure transcendent joy for me.
But I've always felt like there's a creepy side. It feels like to me too, in that when I'm, especially with, I've experienced it a lot with Ostium, possibly more so than any other thing I've ever done before, because I'll have a loose outline and then the characters will just come up with this new thing and lead me on this totally different tangent. And I'm like, where the heck is this coming from? I'm just going to let them do it. And it's like almost creepy because it's like, I didn't do this. They're doing it. And it's just coming. And again, with Ostium, there's been tons of times where it's like, oh no, there's going to be a tough scene or episode to write, but I just make myself do it. And then when I actually do it, it's like, it just pours out and comes so easy. And it's like, again, a little bit creepy of like, where is this coming from? I mean, I feel like this is obviously where the term, the muse, idea came from probably too, of just being in this area.
Yeah. Well, and not knowing, like that's even, it's something that it's the closest thing to magic I've ever seen.
Totally. Yeah. That's a good word for it too. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're in this flow and you're like, where are these ideas coming from? Because you're not consciously thinking them. Right. And I think we're all a little bit afraid of our own unconscious. And it's like, okay, what are you going to pull out? Oh, gee, what's this? What are these characters doing? But it's magic. It's the place that I want to be.
Totally. Yeah. Like if you just be there like drugs. You can be there all the time.
I want to be there all the time. Like, why would I want anything? Which could maybe be problematic, but I don't know. It's just carving out the time and the space for you to be able to get there. Fighting past the resistance that keeps us away from it is also a challenge.
Do you find that with different projects, you're able to get there easier?
I have a real problem with overthinking. And when I'm overthinking, it completely inhibits any sense of flow. It completely keeps me out of the zone because I'm not letting the subconscious take control. I'm like driving this bus with like white knuckles, like, oh, you will go in this direction. You will
but it's secretly a Tesla and it has self-driving capabilities and you're out of control.
I'm not letting it go. I'm not letting it get to flow. And it's, so when I'm working on a new project or when I'm working on something that I know won't have an immediate, like criticism base, like it's so much easier just to let myself go and enjoy the process. Whereas something like Girl in Space, where people are waiting for season 2, it's just like, oh, I keep overthinking things and like, oh, they're going to want this character to do this. So I have to find a way to make this happen. And it just becomes There's just, it's the opposite of the magic. Yeah. It's trying to like hammer these like nails into a board and they're not going in all the way.
Now, do you feel this is something that as a writer you learn to do, or did it kind of develop? Do you think, people who can't, may have issues doing it, or, have other ways if they can do it, or,
This is such a good question. And I think the answer that I have for it is maybe not a universal thing. I think that we reach some of these things in different ways. But for me, I think that flow is my natural state, and everything that I've learned has taken me away from it.
Right.
So like,
because it's putting more structure and rules to it. And because again, I really feel this only really happens when it's something that I'm just free writing and letting just happen. Yeah. But then John Irving, I know he starts with the ending of a book and then writes it as quick as possible and then spends 4 years editing the thing. And that editing is all the thing for him. So obviously it's different for other writers.
Oh, absolutely.
But whereas Stephen King is like, if you say outline, he like spits at you, because it's just like, oh no, I just want an idea in my head. And if it stays there, then it's a book and I'm just going to write it.
Yeah. I tend to be more on that side of things. And but I've also noticed like, if I do have some like beats planned out, that allows me to get into the moment of flow a little bit easier, because I'm like, oh, I'm writing this scene. Oh, and this is going to happen. And my imagination trips merrily along and gets me into that place.
And it's probably one of those things that you have to trust what's happening, not to want to be like, well, we're not following the outline here. This is changing something here, so I'm not going to do this, but to actually let it do its thing and go in its weird way. Do. I actually did that with my little fiction journaling I've been doing too, where it was like, I had a thing in an episode where it was like, it was going this way. And I was like, well, it has to go this way. So I won't do this little side thing, but I'll keep that and make it a little, fiction journal side project thing of that, which was kind of fun just to be like, oh, I'm going to do this little Johnny, trip this way that is never actually going to happen, because I was able to just do it in the journal. It was a lot more free in that way,
Well, have you noticed with the fiction journaling, has that affected your ability to get in and out of that state of flow or the zone?
I don't think so. No. I think just because it's mostly with ostium, it's never been anything I've ever done. With the novels I've worked on, short stories, whatever it is, this has been so different, where it's literally just like, I sit in the chair and it's like they're telling me the story and I'm just writing it every time, even though I think I know what it is. Just like, okay, it's going to be this. And if I don't know what it is, I'm worried about it, but I still just sit down and do it. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's going to happen now. Well, that makes total sense. Okay. And even to the point where I'd made plot mistakes along the way and haven't realized till later. And that's kind of a thing with podcasts, is a little tricky, where if the episode is done and whatever, then it's like, well, that's happened. Well, what I do now is I just figure out, well, I got to fix that later on because that happened for a reason. And the feedback I've gotten is, well, it made it feel more realistic that way because people make mistakes.
Yeah. Characters make mistakes and not everything goes according to plan. And I like that.
I think you should write a book called Magic and go into detail on all this. Yeah. Well, actually, isn't there a book called Magic or Making Magic?
There's a Big Magic by Liz Gilbert. If you've read that, that's an interesting one on creativity.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. So now I'm going to hit you with, why don't you do a book recommendation? Because usually I end the episodes with a book recommendation.
Oh, I have the perfect one.
Yay.
I cannot stop talking about this book. And I know I mentioned it earlier in the episode, but The Fisherman by John Langan. It's crossed my path
a few times, but I need to just get it and make it happen.
I had never read him before. I'd never heard of him before. I don't even know how I found The Fisherman. And like the cover is just like an ocean. And you're like, what is this?
Moby Dick 2.0.
I know, right? And like, I want like fun cover. Like I'm totally this awful reader who chooses books because they have pretty covers. And then I was like, this looks boring. But oh my gosh, the writing is astounding. Cool. And he does a story within a story within a story, and it feels natural and organic.
But it's not confusing or overwhelming. It just makes sense. Yeah.
You know exactly who is where and who's talking to who and what time period you're in. It spans hundreds of years, and yet it's so intimately focused on the main character. It's just I'm making all sorts of hand gestures right now for those of you who cannot see me. Please read this book. It is horror. So I will preface this by saying it's not for everyone. It's horror. It's weird. It gets into the cosmic horror thing that we were talking about a little bit earlier, but just really original and really, really cool. So
awesome. I kind of have two. One, I'm just started reading really is the Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig.
Oh, that's new, isn't it? That's like brand new.
Yeah. Even though he has that massive The Wanderers that came out last year, he's already written another huge book. I guess the pandemic helped him. I don't know. But it starts out, it's like I don't know if it's a haunted house, but it's just really weird, dark horror. And I've only just started really, and weird stuff is going on. So that feels like it's just going to be a good fun. And the reason I wanted to get it, I mean, I like him anyway, but also everyone was just raving about it on Twitter, just how like it changed their life. It's like psychological horror and stuff. I need it
immediately. I just need it.
And then the other one I just finished is it's the first, I think, of a series or a trilogy, A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, I think the author is. Yeah, and it's about these 4 Londons. There's 4 different kinds of Londons, and like 2 of them have magic. 1 doesn't have magic, and 1 you can't actually get to because it broke magic. And magic is like this living entity thing. And they talk about, it's all about this balance between, you have to be a part human, a part magic and stuff like that. But it was kind of like a little bit Garth Nick's Old Kingdom, a little bit, Neil Gaiman-y, and just there was a whole blend of different things. A little bit of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and that bit feel in there too. And it was just, I wasn't expecting too much, but it was recommended, and that's the first one I read of the series, and it was enjoyable.
I tried to get into that one, and I didn't know what I was getting into, and it didn't fit with my brain. But now this recommendation, I want to give it another try.
Because again, the summary didn't do much for me, but it was on this list of like best sci-fi fantasy over the last 10 years or something like that, list that came out recently that everyone was talking about, and it was on there. So I was like, fine. And because it's audiobook, I kind of I push myself further because I'm listening to it when I'm working. So that way it gets a little easier. Okay. I gave it a few hours, and then I'm like, no, I'm done. Alrighty, well, I think that about wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for coming on here, Sarah. You want to plug where people can find you and your awesome stuff?
Gosh, you want to come find me? I'm over at sarahwerner.com. That's SarahWerner.com. You can also listen to my audio drama, Girl in Space. Season 1 is fully released at this point, and I'm working on writing season 2. I also, if you're into writing podcasts, I also have a writing podcast called The Right Now Podcast, like WRITE.
With over 100 episodes.
I know. Isn't that crazy? I can't even get over it.
Awesomeness.
Well, thank you. At some point I'm like, should I just stop? But no, I'll keep going. Right. We still have stuff to say. But thank you for having me on the show today. This has been a delight.
This was a lot of fun. It was fun, kind of deconstructing this from 2 writers talking about it. That's exactly what I was going for. So thanks for being on here, and all you listeners, thank you. And I'll see you on the next Writing Walks.